Since we're going ahead of schedule, I'll just go ahead and get started now. Hello, I'm Geoff Avery, and I'm here to talk about Dancer. Sort of. We're not going to talk about much Dancer. This is all about how to get to Hello World. When I first started trying to use it, I couldn't figure it out. I found lots of sites out there that would say, here's your Hello World script. Let's move forward and do something interesting. And those are all fine. But I couldn't get there. I didn't have a modern Perl. I didn't have the server set up. Didn't have a few other things. So I went out and learned all this stuff and put it together. In the things we're going to cover today, it's quite possible you know 4 of the 5 topics far better than I do. But if you don't know that one part, you're in a world of hurt. So hopefully, between the part that you don't understand and the part that your neighbor doesn't understand, it's kind of spread out. And yes, I do eat my own dog food. I took last year's slides and I followed the instructions. And I did it again and made the corrections that needed making. So this year's slides are all the new data and a lot of the old words, having followed the instructions. So let's get started at the beginning. What is Dancer? It's one of those web frameworks. There are several of them out there. I'm also going to talk a little bit about Mojolicious along the way, about how it's different as you're trying to get set up, because they're both kind of similar. They're both allegedly simple. They both sit on top of Plaque, which sits in the middle between Apache or Nginx way out front. That's in the middle, and Dancer's on the end, which actually does the heavy lifting. And it's loosely modeled on Sinatra from Ruby. So what's PSGI, or Plaque? It's the thing that sits in the middle. It's that super glue that holds everything together and allows you to not have to worry about it all the way out at the Apache Nginx level of things. My mouse just keeps sliding. So, if you went to Dancer, to the website that goes with it, and you looked at their quick start, it says there are just 4 things you need to do. Use curl, go out and collect Dancer. Run the Dancer application directly and tell it to make you a project. Change directory into that project and then type plaque up app.pl, and there it is. It's sitting on port 3000 ready to go. But when you go out surfing the web, how often do you actually want to go to port 3000? Or any other port number for that matter? So we have to figure out how to get around that. The goals for today, we're going to install from the beginning. So when I redid everything, I went to my Linode, I blanked it out, started fresh, exactly the way Ubuntu was given to me, with nothing else set, and I'm going to do all the steps to get from there to the point where we have a working Hello World script. So we'll install GCC, Perl, Nginx, and Starman, all the modules you need, configure the front end, the back end, and actually see Hello World come up on the screen. And occasionally I'll talk Mojolicious, because it's slightly different, but close.
Question here?
Yep.
Where's Starman?
Because at the time I started to do this, people told me that was the new hotness and the way to go.
Okay.
For many cases along the way, I made a design decision, which is not necessarily the one you want to make. But the important thing is the combination of steps I went through get you to the starting line. There are other ways that are probably better, but this one actually does work. And after you played around with Dancer and decide you actually want to do it, then you can configure it even better. So in the slides, I've made a few assumptions, and I will be doing things in the names of 4 different people, 4 different users: Root, me, Mr. Prod, and Mr. Perl. Root is self-explanatory. We'll try to use it as little as possible. Mr. Perl is going to set up a version of Perl that we're all going to use as developers on our system. Me is me, the developer, and Mr. Prod is the one who owns access to the prod version, because we want to share that so that whoever's responsible this week can handle it. We have a fresh Ubuntu right out of the box. Before we start installing things, let's make sure we're up to date. Apt-get, update, and upgrade. It will go and get everything up to snuff so we know where we are to get started. And now we'll install GCC and Friends. So we're going to install Build Essential, and it gives us a list of things that will be installed and some suggested packages. I didn't install any of the suggested packages in this example, but look at the list, see if there's anything you're going to need, and if you need them, go ahead and do it now while it's cheap. Next, we'll install Nginx, which is a competitor to Apache. At the time I chose, that's what they told me to go with. They said it was the new hotness. I think that's still true. I'm not sure. But most of the instructions I give related to Nginx are translatable into Apache. We talked earlier about we're going to have 4 users, so they need to have some groups. This is Unix after all. So we're going to create 2 groups, people and almost root. And yes, all the steps are here, so even though most everyone's supposed to know how to do this already, you don't have to remember, it's in the list. We're going to create a few users, and you can give it a shell, you can put them in the right groups, and I like T-shell, so I threw it in here. I did actually have to install T-shell myself, it doesn't come by default. But if you like one of the other shells, it's probably already there, and you don't have to worry about that step. Next, Plaque is going to want to write some logs, so we're going to create a place for that in var log, and we put it under Plaque up. And then we made some subdomains so that we can have multiple versions of it. And we're going to have these things being run by different people, so each of them needs their own place, so we created a directory for each of us. And I went ahead and chmoded them to 777, or as somebody told me recently, the mark of the beast. I gave this presentation once, and one of the feedbacks that I got was, never, ever, ever do 777. That's bad. Yes. I mentioned that fact the next time out, and someone else said, yeah, but if you're doing this on multiple machines and you're behind the firewall anyway, keeping track of all the users and the groups is just a pain in the ass. Maybe it's easier to just 777 it. No. So, the important thing is 777 really does work, or some definition of work. And if you're just trying to see if you can get it working, that will get you there. You probably should go the slightly more secure route and change the ownership of the directories, but that's between you and your maker and your sysadmin. And anyone else who can get access to the machine. Nginx is also going to write some logs. We're also going to put it in var log, and we're going to make some subdomains and give them to all the appropriate users. All the things I said about the last slide apply here too. PID, the process ID. This is one thing that I actually learned in this whole process that I had not known before. And that is when you want to kill a process, it's really nice to know its process ID so you can kill it. And you need to write that down somewhere when you start the process so you'll know it later when it's time to kill it. And the solution is you put it in var run, and it sits there in a file of the name of the process, and the thing that's written inside the file is the number, and later you can use it and we'll see an example. One important thing to note, var run gets kind of cleaned out every time you restart the machine. So I said here, make a directory called plackup, and we'll write it in there. That's probably not the greatest solution because that directory gets blown away, and you'll have to either recreate it every time you start up, find some hoop to jump through that will make it not go away. I think that's what I actually did on my machine, but I can't remember how I did it. Or instead of writing your process ID as var run plackup slash something, make it plackup underscore something. And then it's right in the directory, and when it gets blown away, you don't have to worry about your directory going away out from under you. 2 aliases I'm going to set. This is done up for the root person. We're going to change where Perl brew is going to happen, and we're going to give a command so we'll be able to restart Nginx. And in both cases here, I'm giving you the seashell family of answer and the bash family, because normally when someone gives an example, they only think everyone uses bash, which I don't find to be true. So here's the answer both ways. Next, it's time to install Perl Brew so that we will have a Perl. You could use the Perl that came with your system, but there's a lot of other things on your system that rely on that Perl, and if you go and mess it up, that might be really, really bad. So I put my own version of Perl up. Another problem I have is I find if I try to use the Perl that came with it, if I'm installing modules using CPAN- or the older CPAN+, and they have a not Perl component, sometimes GCC doesn't quite match and it gets very cranky. So we're just going to skip all that and put our own Perl up. So let's, as root, go out and collect from CPAN, local lib, and app Perl brew. And we're doing this to the system Perl because we haven't got the other one in place yet. Next, we're going to make a directory where we're going to put it. This matches up with our alias we created earlier. And we're going to put it in opt Perl brew, because opt is a good place to put these sorts of things. And then we will change its ownership to Mr. Perl in the almost root group, because that's who we're going to have taking care of it so that we can all access it as needed. Next, we're going to set a few more aliases for Mr. Perl, and that is we're going to set that root again so that it knows where it's going to go. If you're using Perl brew the way it was designed, you use it as a mere mortal, and it puts all your Perls in your home directory. That's not what I want to do. I want to have one Perl that we can all share, especially me, the developer, and me, the person taking care of the production side. Next, we're going to init Perl brew so that we'll be able to use it. We'll see what versions are available. When I did this spring, 5.18.0 had just come out, 5.18.1 is out now, and 2 may show up eventually. Or if you want to live wild and crazy, take the development version, 19. Next, we'll install a Perl of our choice. I picked 5.18.0. It says here this could take a while. They're not kidding. If you haven't done it lately, it took about 25 minutes for me. It does have a tail log instruction here, so you can follow along, go get some food, let it run. Yeah?
The take 25 minutes in the machine that's on the ground to some other machine.
This was on the cheapest Linode I could get, the very smallest one.
Okay.
So if you have a big beefy machine, you might do a little better. I don't expect so, really. Instead of having my shebang line say to use the system Perl over in use lib user local Perl, I guess it is, we're going to put it in opt Perl brew current, so we're going to set up a symlink now, and then as we install newer Perls later, nothing will have to change. It'll all be in the same place. Time to install some Perl modules. I chose to go with DBI, DVD SQLite, and YAML. If you're really in the modern Perl world, you probably don't need DBI anymore because you're using X-Class or one of the other modern ones. But I find that even if you don't need it, it's good to install it because it has a not Perl component, and if you have a problem with C or anything else that's going to get in the way, you find it out real quick. YAML is so we can handle the configuration for Dancer. It is technically optional. There are other ways, but I chose to go with it. And then we will install Plaque, Task Plaque, Starman, then Dancer, Dancer Text Template, Toolkit. And those are all the modules we need to make Dancer run. After I did that and got all the way through the end of the slides, I went back to try Mojolicious, so I just added Mojolicious also. I think if you had stopped here after Starman and just did Mojolicious without the other two, you'd be all set and it would work. So you don't need the Dancer part. I haven't tested that yet. I probably should someday. One more thing to change for our mirror user, and that is to change your path. We're going to put the place where our Perl is on the front of the path so we don't have to worry about it. And now it's time to go and do basically the second step of our 4 quick steps, all the way back here on slide 25. We're going to make a place where we're going to have all our websites. And I did it just in the websites directory. So the second step from the quick start was dancer -a my web app. And it will make all these files for you. The list you see is actually slightly longer because they'll show you the directories you're creating too. But you run out of real estate on the screen, so I decided to cut them out. So we have created a website. Now it'd be nice to actually make it run, and for that you use the command +up. By default it runs on port 3000. I decided to put it on a different port, and then you run all the way down to app.pl, which is the script that'll make it happen. And now it is running on port 3000 on your server, and all the logging happens right here in the commands in front of you because you did this from the command line. If you're doing the Mojolicious version, at this point, instead of +up, you use Morbo all the way down to myapp.pl, and it is again running on port 3000. And if you want to go over and see what one of those looks like, this is the Hello World script as they give it to you, and about the only thing interesting about the page is this link here that shows you some configuration variables. So now we're going to configure the front and back end. So we're going to configure Nginx out front and Starman in the back. And on the next batch of slides, if you see any of these values, these are the things you're going to want to substitute in things that are meaningful for you. So I have a directory and a domain name and some port numbers. And all of those things are the parts you want to replace. But now you at least know what you're looking for the replacement. To tell Nginx what you want to do, you create a file in etc. Nginx sites available. Apache does it in the same place. And the things you need to tell it are what domain is it listening to, what ports it's listening on, where are these static portions that Dancer is not taking care of, so my images and JavaScript are outside in a different location. And then the big location here is the port forwarding, so that when someone comes in on the real domain, it switches them over to the port we set up where the backend will be running. We did this in sites available. There's a second directory right next to it called sites enabled, and you just make a symlink to it from the enabled side, and it will run. This way you can keep your files around even if you turn the website off. So there shouldn't be much actual content in enable. It should just be a bunch of symlinks. Now, starting the back end. Earlier we did it from the command line using +up. But that means that all the logging is right there on the console in front of you, which is quite a pain. And if your link goes down, you take the site down with you. So we'd like to demonize this, and that's what Starman does. It's the part that sits in the middle and takes care of it. And you can tell it which port to listen on, where to write all its logs, where to put its process ID so we can use that later to kill it, and a number of workers. By default, the number of workers is 5. I figured for my development sites in the back, I would just set it to 1 and be done with it. It's been pointed out to me you should actually set it to 2, not to 1. And that's because with the port forwarding going on from out front, if you have more than 1, sometimes it goes here and sometimes it goes there. If there's only 1, it will always go to the same place, and you might not catch some errors that would otherwise be creeping in. So if you set it to 2, it will bounce back and forth occasionally, and if something's going wrong, you're more likely to catch it. How do you kill one of these things? It's kill, and then the value in that place where we kept the process ID. And I have one last bonus topic to go through, and this is something that can go terribly wrong and you might not be able to notice it immediately. So here's the default configured file that comes with it in YAML, and I decided I wanted to make a change. So I took that file and I changed it to this. To this. Does anybody see anything wrong between those two?
Indentation.
Yes. In YAML, like in Python, indentation matters. If you get it wrong, something can go wrong. And what happens is, control line, this. Ooh.
That's pretty good evidence of stuff. I mean, it says YAML parser and just an indentation.
It does.
It took you off.
But I didn't see it right away. This thing will print, and print, and print, until either you notice, or your log, an entire drive fills up.
That happened.
It did. On the server where I set this up, originally, I have 3 incarnations. There's me, the dev version, where I push things and make sure that I pushed enough across and it's working, and then the production version, and then I have about 14 domains. So I had all of those running, and I messed this up in 2 of them. And it just filled the drive and everything went bad. So this is an error that's not easy to spot, but now that you've been warned, you'll at least know where to go looking when something goes terribly wrong on you. And that's it.